Hey everybody, I'm your host, it's the Iron Sun, and I'm gonna go over a couple of cool stuff, but the main topic I'm gonna talk about is male dominance hierarchies, or more generally speaking, hierarchies, bypassing hierarchies. So, to before I get into that, um, I think kind of have to preface probably with a funny video. Why not? No, I can't do that. My good copyrights. Let's see if I can find a funny video. Something not super serious. So I'm not gonna cover any funny videos or anything. I'm just gonna get seriously straight to the milk and honey. So bypassing hierarchies, super simple. So the concept here is, with a group of males, you have hierarchies, and with females, you have hierarchies, and these hierarchies are differentiated between the male and the female in terms of most of the hierarchies, at least in tribes. So I'll speak for tribal life, and I'll speak for let's say you have a female profession versus a male profession, and that's what delineates the hierarchies. So let's say ballet, for example. Yes, a male ballet a person who is male can go into that particular arena, but what you'll see is most of the people in that particular arena are males or females, and that will pretty much dictate the rules of engagement within that given hierarchy. So, what I'm talking about, generally speaking, with hierarchies, you move up in the hierarchies depending on rank. And your rank is determined by your level of competence, and it's your level of competence is also influenced by the people you have around you. So, if you have certain avenues, um, if you have certain people to give you direction, so let's say you have the eye of the people who are at the top, so the elders in this particular case, then you can be trained and given more competence. So then you can move up faster and faster and faster. What we see in the Me Too era with a lot of women who are complaining that they don't have access to male mentors because the male mentors are worried that they're going to be um, the male mentors are worried that the mentors that the women would actually benefit from are worried for being in the room with a woman because they don't want to put their life or their career at risk. So in this particular case, you kind of see, especially in the modern world, you see a mingling of the two hierarchies, the two male and female dominance hierarchies. But the males are less likely to want to actually interact with that intermingling of hierarchies because of certain restrictions. Because, like I was saying, there's certain rules of engagement depending on whether you're in a male hierarchy or a female hierarchy. And a lot of pre 1960s, that was basically male hierarchical structures in the workplace. So it was bound by rules dealing with meritocracy and all the other values that males competence, uh, assertiveness, a lot of things, especially bluntness as well, because that pretty much goes with that competence and assertiveness, which a lot of those are largely male traits. Now there are women who assume there are women who show assertiveness and things like that, but you see different characteristics with female hierarchies. Um, Namely, uh, so to go further with that, like I was saying earlier, to go back to the point, so males, so with the intermingling hierarchy, you have an intermeshing between the the male and female hierarchy, but then you have the male elders. Typically, typically, whenever you have males who are the elders and who are actually competent and in the high positions, you will have females and males vying for those mentors because they want to move up, because they want to move up in the hierarchy. So in order to in order to move up in the hierarchy, they have to elicit um, the help of largely the males, because it's, let's be honest, it's the workforce. So most of the people who are going to be in the high positions are going to be male. So you're going to have the male employees and the female employees vying for that. Um, what makes it difficult for the females is things like Me Too, because that ends up becoming something that's prevalent in a female hierarchy. That particular system. Okay, males are doing bad things. They're harassing us. We have to destroy them. That particular way of dealing with things comes from a female hierarchy, which in its own right is not bad to punish people for bad behavior. But then it also calls in to question the ability for the females to actually develop their own level of competence, because the males kind of, so it makes it difficult for the women to actually move up in the hierarchy, which is interesting. That's a slightly different caveat there. I wouldn't say that that's a bypass. See, today we're talking about a bypass of hierarchical structures. So that's not a method of bypass for the structures inherently. The idea is that if you can get mentorship, you can move up in the hierarchies much quicker, which is why a lot of people are drawn towards mentors, whether they be male or female. If they're competent in their particular, if they're competent in their particular field, and they actually yield certain results, they're going to be in demand. That's regardless of whether they're male or female. The thing is, what makes it difficult is a lot of the restrictions on laws and even the climate, the political climate. Me Too, that impacts in a weird way. I could almost say that it impacts more men more in terms of, like, just potential hazards. But the females are actually impacted by it as well. But for the purposes of this conversation, I think I should. With that being said, I can kind of get to the gist of what I'm trying to say. One of the main ways for bypassing a hierarchical structure and getting what you want out of people without having to put in much effort. Um, so the mentor route. So yes, you could go down the mentor route, but that means you're going to have to put in work, and you're still going to have to exercise a lot of thought muscles, which a lot of people still don't want to do that. But influence. Let's say you have people who are influential, who have a high degree of power. They could literally just place you in those positions, even if you don't really have a high degree of competence. So that's a particular method that both men and women use that to bypass hierarchical structures. They surround themselves by people who are in positions of power and influence, and those people place them in positions of higher degrees of competence than they have in order for them to capitalize and earn more money than what they're actually competent in. We see this a lot. And in a lot of ways, this type of pluralism, this type of nepotism is a word that it fosters a lot of resentment in lower income groups. A lot of African Americans, a lot of times, that I think that's where you get the whole blame the white man kind of mentality. Comes out of that as well. And there's a strong uh, dissidence that comes from that particular group, and also from females, because of nepotism. Because a lot of the males, of course, they're vying for each other's attention, but they're also helping each other get up, because they always want to help the person who's helping them get to where they want to be. But then the women see it, a lot of the women see it as like, oh, they're men. Men are just trying to help out the men. There's also a component of that. Um, and I'm tackling a lot of things at once. So the people who are watching this, just put stuff in the comments because I'm saying a lot of different things. But if you unpack what I'm saying, I believe it'll make sense to you. So I don't get lost. So the women, um, so the women in this particular situation. Let's see if I can go back on that. Um, I might have to rewind it, go back, and make a second video, possibly. Let's see. Let me get my bearings and see if I can go back with that thought and add a little bit to it. Mm. One thing I want to say is this is just my thought off the cuff. If anyone has any other ideas, I'd be open hearing them. This is just what I think about hearing about dominance hierarchies, which Jordan Peterson talks about dominance hierarchies quite a lot, or at least he brings it up in his conversations. And this is something I think humanity is kind of lost, and we've forgotten these aspects of our inner workings and how we work, and it's causing a lot of issues for a lot of people. Um, so having power and influence, and having that be, surrounding yourself with people who have power and influence, that's different than mentorship. Because mentorship, yes, they could have power and influence, but with mentorship, there's the underlying implication that you're actually going to take the knowledge that you're given and work to climb that hierarchy. You're not necessarily going to use your mentors to place you into a position of power that may or may not be unearned. Um, so the difference is you actually see a bypassing of hierarchies and a need for competence with being around people who have power, because if a person has power and they control the structure you're in, they can bypass the specific competence needs of that particular company merely for the fact that they like your company. Um, you see this a lot with attractive women. A lot of times you'll have women who are very attractive. This also plays into the halo effect, which is the case for both males and females. If you're an attractive male, you're gonna get what you want. If you're an attractive female, you'll get what you want. If you're the average looking female, you will also get what you want. Which, um, basically, um, here's the exception, because I kind of left out the average guy. Right? If you're an average guy with a high degree of charisma, there's a good chance you're gonna get what you want. Um, so. Um, this is kind of the breakdown where it's kind of going to get a little bit more edgy, because I think the third way, or the second way, where you can bypass hierarchical structures, especially in the workforce, but you can copy and paste and put this towards any structure you can think of. Sexuality. So this is something that females have largely been doing since the dawn of time. And this is in particular, granted, you do have male gigolos and you have males who are, male strippers and stuff like that, but they're in their own hierarchies. So they have their own businesses, and the women come to them, right? The women come to them and elicit their services from their particular hierarchies. But the women, what I notice is they actually go to the male dominated hierarchies. They go to those hierarchies and use their femininity and sexuality in order to gain leverage in that particular environment. Now, I'm pretty sure most people have probably heard of the common phrase, "Oh, she's sleeping up the ladder" or something like that. Um, that's pretty much what I'm getting at. If you could um, see, blackmail just came to mind. That's also another way where a male or female could move up the ladder. But sexuality, I think, is inherent to the female condition, because that is the most, uh, that is at least something that most males actually put a high price on. So their access to sexuality, you kind of see a lot of women who would do that would basically, um, for lack of a better word, you could say they're escorts, professional escorts, or culturated prostitutes. But you don't need to be competent. If you're using sexuality, you can move up in the hierarchies much quicker. You don't need mentorship. You don't need to be around people who have status. Actually, well, what's funny is it actually requires you to be around people who have position and status. So it's the same as if a man wanted to move up the hierarchy. It's just you don't need the charisma, which the average man is not going to have the charisma to be able to sway someone who's in a position of power. But the woman, not only does she not need charisma, the fact that she can use her sexuality and that most men have, like, it's a weakness for most men. Um, that in itself is basically, I mean, it's that thing where you look at and you're like, wow, I can see where I fit in this little small niche right here. I can move mountains. So that's a niche where women can move mountains and they can move up through hierarchies without having to. Granted, and a lot of people would say, some people would say they're selling their souls, but they're actually increasing their earning power tenfold. Um, Only thing is they're sacrificing their virginity. I guess is the worst case scenario there. So as long as they keep their mouth shut with any partners they run into in the future, um, I don't know. You tell me if that's a fair trade. I'm not really sure, but so there's a couple of other ways you can move up dominance hierarchies, and I called one out. So a lot of politicians are blackmailed. Um, Blackmail kind of runs rampant in a lot of different industries, but that's a way where you could move up the ladder. It's a little bit more sociopathic and it's more directly aggressive. Uh, in terms of another person. You're kind of holding the person hostage and saying, "Hey, I earn more, or you get ratted out." Happens all the time in a lot of industries. Just as effective. It's a little bit more aggressive, which ironically, I mean, the sexual thing is also just as aggressive, but it's a different type of aggression. Um, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Now, the significance of a woman being able to bypass, in particular, male dominance hierarchies is that the males who are in those particular industries who have to move up merely with competence, and perhaps even work on their charisma to where they can sway their bosses to give them a raise or give them a different position, they eventually get resentful because if they're around females who can use sexuality and just generally basically being a female as a means of getting up. Now, you have to think as well, a lot of corporations are actually incentivized to hire women merely for their company to look good, to make it look like it's the same reason why companies are incentivized to hire people who are African American. Because if your company looks like it's diverse, then you're copying the model that other companies that are good and powerful are presenting. So then it makes you look, so in a way, it makes you look very good, and it has nothing to do with competence. But it's almost like the companies are looking at the other rich guys, and they're like, "Hey, I want that Bentley." But then the super rich guy is like, "You want this Bentley? I don't know. Copy my culture. Copy what I do, and you'll get the Bentley, right?" Um, yeah. So I mean, if you had a company that wasn't doing that good, and it had diversity, it wouldn't matter, right? They would look at that company model and be like, "Oh, they hire black people and a whole bunch of women. They don't even have a particular reason for it. They're just doing it." But that seems dumb. It only seems dumb because they're not affluent. They're not powerful. Their company's not bringing in big enough profits, profit margins, and stuff like that. Um, just something to consider. Now, I think um, one of the more significant things about women being able to use sexuality to bypass dominance hierarchies, in particular male hierarchies, is that if they can bypass these hierarchies, it basically renders actually needing to have competence. Um, they don't need to be smart. When you look at our evolutionary history and you look at biology, um, The males have basically had to exceed every margin on every single stat: intelligence, speed, power, or physical abilities, height, everything you can think of. Um, Intellect, anything. So the males actually outstretched to women on all of the margins, and a lot of people would argue that the women are just as intelligent. But the issue with our biological and evolutionary history is that the women have not had to exercise their intelligence. So whether they are intelligent or not, it doesn't matter. The burden of performance actually still lies on the males. So with that being said, um, one of the concerns I wanted to focus on is that the males in this particular hierarchy, um, who are actually witnessing the women bypassing the hierarchy, they end up being subject to resentment and anger. And this causes dissent. This causes really bad things. Eventually, I can see it does, because let's say the male is actually somewhat competent, and his 2 or 3 year career track, along with that, he starts to develop a high degree of competence over time, and it happens gradually. Um, he's being edged out by the next female or the next African American, because if you're African American, you basically get the same benefits as a female, minus the sex. Because if you're sleeping with your boss, it's just kind of a easy money, basically. You um, doesn't always work out that way, and of course you have a whole bunch of messes in offices and businesses across the United States where it doesn't end in a woman's favor and it actually blows up in her face. But um, a lot of bypassing of the fact that women can bypass male dominance hierarchies is all the more reason why separating the hierarchies is something that should at least be considered seriously. Because the commingling of these hierarchies it has consequences. That's that's the framework for everything else that I think will come with this kind of conversation in the future with someone who is serious and honest. Um, that's it. I covered everything in a span of 22 minutes, and I did it without really doing a break. But this is a breakdown of hierarchies, and in particular male dominance hierarchies, as it pertains to the workforce. And of course, you can extrapolate this and compare it and copy and paste to any other structure you want to understand. I think understanding human nature is going to get us to the point where we can actually excel, and to where both sides, males and females, can actually enjoy the work experience without having to be at each other's heads all the time. Because you have office environments of men who want to have pinup dolls and stuff like that, but then you have women in the office who complain because it goes against their sensibilities. Um, a lot of this can be fixed by merely separating the hierarchies. You have different rooms, different buildings, things like that. They're still bringing you revenue, but you're not operating off of laws of the jungle, which is inevitable if you're gonna intermingle those two hierarchies. Unless I'm wrong. Same thing can be said for male and female gyms. Same thing can be said for pretty much any industry you can think of. The military. There's a lot of issues there. Um, the bypassing of ranks and stuff like that in the military. So I'll give you an example with that, and this is kind of simple. If a guy has to do 20, 30 push-ups, and a woman does 10 push-ups, and she gets promoted to colonel, for example, um, how can you justify her promotion to that particular rank when she can't meet the same metrics as the other guy? Um, Now, yes, you promoted her to colonel, so now that guy who's also a colonel has to look that woman in the face, or both of them basically are saluted by people who are lower than them. But the people who are lower than them, well, they're actually capable of doing more push-ups, sit-ups, and basically any other um, physical thing that she's capable of. But yet they're supposed to salute her as if she's a superior. But quite literally, they're actually superior to her. So it calls into conflict meritocracy and actual uh, integrity of the military. Um, I could go on for days about this in a lot of different industries. I know our protective instincts call us to make us want to appeal to women's sensibilities and make them feel like they can take on the world. There's nothing wrong with uplifting people, but there is something wrong with being unreasonable or with lying to them in order to make them feel good. We do it to children. You know, we tell them that they can be anything they want. But what I can see is we're doing the same thing we do to children. We're doing it to women. We're saying, hey, you can be anything you want. We're doing it to African Americans. We're doing it to, now, when I say that, I'm saying, here's the thing. Like, you can't do anything you want. Some people aren't as tall. Some people aren't as physically fit, right? So you can do whatever you want within reason. And it's up to the individual person to decide where they can go, what industry they can go on and thrive in. But reality is always going to hit you in the face at a certain point. And I think if we can get back to understanding that, we can kind of get back to America being a country where you can actually go to have opportunities and not just go to have things handed to you, because that's kind of what's gotten us in this situation. That's all. Just think it over. I've said a mouthful.